If you've ever walked away from a conversation feeling entirely turned around, confused, and questioning your own sanity, well, this explainer is going to be incredibly validating for you. Let's get right into it. There is this incredibly powerful quote right from our source text that honestly says it all. That's not confusion, that's control. Have you ever felt that visceral knot of self-doubt? Where you remember a conversation perfectly clearly, but someone looks you dead in the eye and tells you it never happened? Our source material brilliantly points out that the confusion you carry often isn't an accident. It's a carefully placed tool. Okay, let's dive into this. To make the anatomy of these 12 manipulations easy to digest, we've organized them into a few core buckets. The weapon of confusion, distorting your reality, weaponizing your empathy, dodging accountability, and finally, how clarity kills manipulation. Starting with Section 1, the weapon of confusion, which is really the foundation of manipulation. Before we break down the specific tactics, we kind of have to understand the ground floor. Every single manipulation technique we are about to cover relies heavily on one specific thing, making you doubt your own instincts. Let's look at the tactic that arguably does the most damage quietly: gaslighting. It doesn't come at you all at once. Actually, it's incredibly slow. It's one denied conversation, one rewritten memory. The source notes that manipulators will say things with such calm, absolute certainty that you start checking with them before you even believe your own experience. They are directly targeting your grip on reality, because taking away your self-trust is their greatest weapon. Moving to Section 2, distorting your reality, tactics that separate you from the truth. Take future faking, for example. The source gives a great illustration of this. Notice how month 1 brings a vivid promise of a shared future, like, say, a trip to Portugal or a shared apartment. But by month 3, the timeline magically shifts. And by month 6, that future just never arrives. These promises aren't real plans. They're basically management tools to keep you emotionally invested and compliant right now, all while they avoid any real accountability. And this brilliantly illustrates intermittent reinforcement. You get high warmth, dropping to freezing cold, and then bam, back to high warmth. The source compares this directly to a slot machine. It's literally the most addictive kind of cycle. You might think that cold period is just a rough patch, but no, it is the core mechanism. That unpredictability is exactly what pulls you in, making you work overtime just to earn the warmth back. Then we have triangulation. This is where a manipulator introduces a third party, maybe an agreeing friend or some unnamed group with concerns, basically to make your voice feel smaller. Suddenly, a dynamic that should just be two people working it out shifts into you defending yourself against this invisible audience. You aren't just wrong. Suddenly, everyone thinks you're wrong. So how do we actually fight back? Well, here are the practical antidotes from the text for this bucket. For gaslighting, write it down. Not to prove it to them, but to protect your own reality. For future faking, watch their actions, not their words. Follow through is data. For intermittent reinforcement, measure the baseline. Stop measuring the relationship by its absolute best days. Look at a regular Tuesday. And for triangulation, pull the triangle apart. Demand direct communication. All right, Section 3, weaponizing your empathy, turning kindness into vulnerability. The author notes that these specific tactics are precision designed to target and exploit highly empathetic people. So if you are naturally compassionate, this is probably going to hit pretty close to home. First up is love bombing, which is super hard to spot because it initially feels incredible. But notice the contrast here. Genuine connection builds slowly with time, friction, and shared experience. Love bombing skips all of that and manufactures deep connection without any actual foundation underneath it. The text explains that this early intensity isn't love, it's bait. It's designed to hook you just to see how much you'll tolerate later to get that feeling back. Then there's guilt tripping. Obviously, nobody announces they're going to manipulate you. Instead, they quietly reposition you as someone who failed or is just ungrateful. As the source highlights, genuine guilt comes from your own values being violated. Manufactured guilt comes from someone else's agenda. The heavy feeling of guilt you have in your chest is very real, but the cause of it entirely fabricated. And that leads us directly into playing the victim. The exact moment you try to hold them accountable, all of their past history and trauma rushes into the room. Your empathy is treated as a vulnerability, accountability gets completely buried under their past pain, and you suddenly transform from someone raising a valid issue into someone managing a fragile situation. Your truth just gets permanently postponed. So here are your defenses for when your empathy is weaponized. For love bombing, enforce a pace. The right person absolutely won't rush you. For guilt tripping, pause and ask yourself if you actually did something wrong. And for playing the victim, hold both compassion and accountability at the exact same time. As the source beautifully states, true compassion does not require your silence. You can care deeply about someone's history and still hold them to a standard. Section 4. Dodging accountability. How manipulators structurally avoid taking responsibility. Everything we've talked about really culminates in this structural avoidance of taking responsibility. A prime example is the silent treatment. Look, silence can be peaceful, but this kind of silence is definitely not a pause. It is a punishment. This cold withdrawal exploits your fundamental human need for resolution. The manipulator forces you to bend and apologize for things you didn't even do, simply because silence costs them absolutely nothing, while it costs you everything. We also see moving the goalposts combined with blame shifting. You do exactly what they ask, but the standards are privately revised, so the target just keeps drifting further away. You're kept in a permanent state of not enough. And when they make a mistake, it rapidly becomes your fault. You end up absorbing the weight of their actions, completely rerouting responsibility away from them. Next is a highly insidious one: weaponized incompetence. It's elegant in a really dark way, honestly. Tasks just quietly land on you without a single argument or raised voice. They just fail, strategically, so badly that you have to step in. They absorb all the freedom, while you absorb all the labor, making their utter lack of contribution invisible. And then we have DARVO. This tactic is so precise, it actually has an acronym: deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. It's a literal formula. You bring up a boundary calmly, and suddenly they deny it, attack you, and claim that they are the victim. The room becomes so emotionally expensive that you actually end up apologizing just for trying to address the problem in the first place. So, the crucial point is how we stop this avoidance. Here are your counters. For the silent treatment, name it without chasing it. For moving goalposts, hold the original agreed-upon standard. For weaponized incompetence, let it fail. Seriously, don't rescue them. And for blame shifting and DARVO, stay anchored to your point and refuse to be rerouted. When there are real consequences, accountability finally has a place to land. Finally, Section 5. Clarity kills manipulation. Taking back your power. These techniques can only survive in the dark. The very moment you name the tactic, when you clearly see the move being made, you strip it of its power completely. You're not uncertain anymore. Let that sink in for a second. The confusion you've been carrying isn't yours. It was placed there by someone who needed you to be uncertain. Your instincts have actually been telling you the truth for a lot longer than you've been listening to them. So, I leave you with this final, empowering question. How will you enforce your boundaries moving forward? Now that you can clearly see the anatomy of these 12 manipulations, you are fully equipped to protect your reality. Take this newfound clarity and practice it in your daily life. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep trusting yourself.